Hi, everyone. Wish I was there with you all. So I'm Theresa Stepaniak with Optum, and I work in the consumer office digital space. And today I'm excited to talk with you about the story that Optum's building of a content services platform and how we are using Adobe's Experience Manager Guides for this experience. And for today's agenda, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the introduction and the value story we have, something we call At Your Service, which is essentially content services made available. And number 3 is It's All Semantics, the role that taxonomy and metadata play in content as a service. And then number 4, If You Build It, They Will Come. This is about the architect and how we set that up. And then number 5, we'll go ahead and take a look at closing remarks. So for today, the value story in the making, show of hands of those individuals who have worked with content and found it unmanageable, difficult to find, not easy to share. Steph and I can imagine that there are several in the room. And so like many of us, we're on a similar journey where we call it modernizing content experience to create value for the business and the products in our organization. Perhaps we're even on the same place in the continuum together. For then, we're looking at things like a fragmented system, and by that, it means that we're unable to find, reuse, and update the content across the enterprise in an easy and efficient manner. Manual processes and unstructured content. That means we have minimal tagging, and it's difficult to share the content across the enterprise. And there's no structured content in use. And then there's limitations to our personalization, and the personalization efforts are heavy and manual, and they're very difficult to scale. But then on the other end of things, where we're at now and making progress through the use of Adobe Experience Manager, Adobe Guides, and the integration of our ontology management tool, along with integration to other key platforms within Optum, we're experiencing the ability to find content more efficiently and share it and reuse it. We're also looking at leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we've created a foundation for personalization platform, and this helps support scalable personalization and deeper personalized experiences. And benefits of centralizing content, there are numerous, and I've just selected a few of the top ones. Professional fees and licensing costs that can be reduced, consolidating the contract, centralizing the content through one platform, using only one API. In the case of third-party content in the enterprise, we right now have 5 different people using the same vendor, and we're consolidating it down where there won't be those license fees for the API by 5 different businesses. And then when reusing content, we're less likely to hire content vendors to create and recreate the same content. The enablement of the line of business engagement is found, and then growth and satisfaction, and we can measure that through NPS. We can also get to a reduction in call time and volume, and even average handle time for the agents who would be on the call, because they're easier to find the content and they're giving out consistent and accurate information. Increased productivity and faster time to market is a very key piece of this, and is something that certainly helps in reducing tech debt as well as content costs. And then feature reuse, capital cost avoidance, pretty self-explanatory, but by being able to reuse technology across the enterprise helps with cost management. And then mitigation of compliance and risk. And this is when you think about helping us all to sing from the same songbook, if you will, and aligning our content messaging. So I'm going to just ask you to go with me here and think about or I invite you to think about how a content ecosystem is like the honeybee hive. As I share this journey, I invite you to consider how this honeybee colony offers a well-established ecosystem. It includes collecting, delivering, storing, managing, culling. This happens to be a life cycle of a beehive. And if you think about it, it's quite similar to how we manage content through a content services platform. So I've been a beekeeper for several years and have found that the bees create a beautiful structure in the hive. And you can see that here by the honeycomb. And the main thing I wanted to point out with this is the bees are very consistent and structured and have a hierarchy. They have the queen, they have the female bees, and then the drones are on the bottom. But the middle part here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, these capped areas are what we would call capped brood. Up here, you'll notice this is nectar. Down here on the bottom end, this yellow in the cells is known as pollen. And then out here is honey. So all within one frame, things are structured and organized, and the bees run the hive knowing where things go with efficiency. And as we think about it and getting into how we went about the content modernization, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And this is Margaret Mead, the American anthropologist. And this is how our work began, is it was a very small group of people that got together and were tired of the content problems that we were facing. And so we began our journey to modernize the content. First off, on the left of the screen here, recognizing the problem. And that wasn't too difficult, as you could imagine. As we found through analyzing end-to-end in the supply chain, we found many areas where there's inconsistencies in content, reusing the same content, having print content still in use when it could be digital, continuously making the same content over and over, and then not maintaining it. And that became a really difficult problem. Another area is bringing together a cross-functional team with the similar vision. And as noted earlier, this includes folks from content strategy, marketing operations, content management, consumer experience, and significant key members in the leadership. So once we did that, there was in-house research and discovery to see what really needed to change and how we would go about doing it. For example, we set up a content reuse pilot from one of the libraries that's in-house. We did some pre-writing of content in emails and paired it with some existing articles from the library, and then created a digital calendar, created all the parts that are needed for a marketing manager to pull perhaps the email campaign together, like the email content, the image, the article. And these were used for custom clients. We set this up calling it monthly health topics. And in a span of 6 months from using this monthly health topic structure and being able to compile the content quickly, there was a savings of 300,000 or 300,000 saved by simply reducing the reduction of recreating the same content and being able to find it all in one location. And besides the cost savings, the marketing managers realized the time to market was increased. Down here on the left, socializing with key stakeholders, that was another very large and important piece, as you might call it, shopping around. And that included consumer experience, marketing, product, and business and sales, taking this across the enterprise and garnering support for the journey. Within the hiring the vendor, we found someone who was knowledgeable in intelligent content. They came in-house and they did some discovery. They knew industry best practices, and then they wrote up a final summary, and synthesizing was the next step that our internal team did. And as you can imagine, running work streams in parallel. At Optum, we call it flying while still building the plane. So enterprise funding strategy, that was one of the key pieces that we needed to bring together, and creating use cases and value stories and making that part of what we would share around. Personalization needs, also understanding from our business partners what they're looking at for personalization. What does that mean to each of them? What types of personalization are they seeking? And then understanding content authoring, and that structured is desirable across our various teams in the enterprise. And one of the things that we did that was important, because this was the group that helped review and drive and helped us come together and share and be a sounding board, was the steering committee. This helped to set the vision, strategy, reviews, and develop scorecards that we use to assess vendors. And over here on the right, we did a couple POCs that were in flight essentially at the same time. One of them was for content authoring, and we looked at, I believe it was over 9 different content authoring capabilities. And obviously the Data XML tool was one of them that we had considered in this. Another in-flight proof of concept that was underway at the same time was for what we call our semantic services layer. We wanted to find a tool or a semantic capability that improved our ontology management, as well as had full integration capabilities and would be able to grow with us. And then content services as a whole, we were looking for a content services platform. So that would enable us to bring together all of these parts into one whole. And where we landed, we came up with recommending the vendor Adobe because of the suite of products that meet our requirements, and with the support that we have in-house with the Center of Excellence, we're poised to realize a greater long-term value. And the top recommendations for moving forward with Adobe is meeting all of our capability requirements that we had outlined in the scorecard. There's excellent client care support, focused on continued growth with their product. They're a leader in the digital space, and then broad use and support across the organization. And then it readily integrates with existing products. And one of the other features, as funding was still being done, ability to purchase capabilities as we're ready to use them. We didn't have to have everything come together at once. A few of the contingencies that were still out there for us were needing to ensure and realize search across the dams and with our search tool. And then the cost that was determined when we better understood the development needs for integration, configuration, and the customization. And then many assumptions based on documentation demos versus the proof of concept. And just to point out why we're not going with, or we didn't go with another vendor, they're not currently working with UHG. There was less internal knowledge and more challenge to integrate. There would be more development required to realize the full capabilities and customize to meet our needs. And then it was less mature in the training and offering and customer service support. And then the one that we did the POC with also had less expertise in the healthcare space. So where we are, we call it our content ecosystem. And this is a nice diagram of it. And when we talk about the content ecosystem, we like a vendor called Simple A, and they have noted that the content ecosystem refers to the technology, the complete technology environment in which the content lifecycle happens within an organization. And what we've got here, this beautiful diagram, in the middle is content services. The next layer is semantic layer, and then personalization rounds it out. And we've got a definition here for content services drawn from Gartner. And the key piece here is that it's a series or a grouping of microservices that can be brought together, such as the APIs or a content repository. And then they're able to manage different content types and make that available to other constituents across the enterprise. Our semantic layer is about managing taxonomy and tags so that humans and computers can identify and then reuse and deliver that content. And then for personalization, it's about tailoring and targeting the content for our members and customers, being able to address their unique health needs and/or requirements, and delivering across omni-channel experiences at each critical moment, either in the member's health journey or the business's journey. So now we'll go ahead and transition here, highlighting what we've accomplished thus far for content authoring, semantic services, content services, content as a service with our 4 internal clients, and then Kafka integration and how that's helping us move forward. Let's take a look here at XML editor and AEM guides. So the way we started out with this is obviously with a content strategy. And the key parts that we looked at would include how did we want to set up the folder structure? What kind of templates or models would we start with? Did we envision having maybe 3 models or 5 models across that anybody could use? Considering how to load it, we even did a setup where we could bulk load from a SharePoint folder for one series and could load as many as like 50 pieces, 100 pieces at the same time. How would we identify what would that content ID be? Another key piece of it was what we call metadata schema and setting that up. We didn't use the metadata structure out of the box from Adobe, but we set up our own. And then as we began the work, we also looked at the content fragment models that we would set up. What are those different type of models for the different content needs? Some examples that we're using are article type, recipes. We've got something called action items and learning goals, and they're essentially short snippets of content, but they also have some CTAs in them. So we built in button 1, button 2, and button 3, and the appropriate alt text. And then being able to send content to agent and member from the same content fragment. So there's a piece of content that goes into the agent's view, and then another piece of content that goes over to the member facing. And as we looked at authoring content in DITA, that's fairly straightforward. It looks like a word processor, which is really great. You can enable the DITA tags. We have it set up and structured. And one of our processes was an automated workflow from DITA to content fragment workflow. And just a few highlights of what's working. There are obviously more. How we set up the folders and that construct that we were using, the ability to configure from DITA to content fragment. And the reason we're doing that is to be future ready. There are some internal portals within Optum that now do use DITA format, but the ones that we're working with at this time don't consume DITA, but we want to be ready to be able to have that as we grow. And then the ability to use an enterprise tool, the tool that we use for editing, we simply use that in Chrome plugin, and we can use that for editing within our AEM guides while we're authoring. And then some of the things about not working, I think I've asked for an internal way to validate content fragments as we build them and making certain they're working. On the Optum side, it was a more of a learning curve, a steeper one than we had anticipated with working with Adobe Guides. And then slower than planned change management in helping our authors understand DITA authoring across different teams, and even our developers, helping them understand, our vendors, in-house content creators. And it will take more training and change management to meet our execution goals. I'll just do, I think I have time, a quick show when I talked about metadata schema. This is a structure that was put together. We set up general governance and lifecycle, copyright and reuse, images, and these two were already there. But one of the pieces with our taxonomy is we use topic, purpose, and audience, and I'll talk about that momentarily. And we set that up so you can easily pick from it. We've got title, short description, author, the channel it publishes, the type. And then once we get into copyright and reuse, we're also capturing the word count, the Fleisch-Kincaid, and documenting whether it is ready for reuse. Government life cycle, we're capturing when a piece of content was created and when it's up for its next review. And let's take a look here at the semantic services layer. That's what we describe as that collection of tools and services that enrich data and content with additional meaning. And what this does is enables people and machines to do more with the content. So for our semantic services tool, we use a third-party vendor that has a cloud-based software for the semantic services. And initially, we got the tool for ontology management because I've got this blocked out here because, as probably like many of you, Excel spreadsheets are the tool of choice to help you create or manage ontologies and build taxonomy or language models. But they're very arduous to keep and maintain and update and share across the various groups and systems that you work with. So what we like about our semantic services tool is the capability of knowledge models, and that allows for us to manage the ontology as well as create language models in it. And in doing this, we collaborate with SMEs that help where we build model for governance and workflow management. For the integration piece with AEM and the use of Optum Unified Taxonomy through tagging and metadata, this feature enables capabilities or an integration that's capable for scaling across the enterprise. In addition to an API integration, the content ecosystems also built a patent pending Kafka connection both to AEM and our global search capability. And what this does, it allows users like internal dev teams or portals to subscribe to any of the unified taxonomy models, as well as any changes that come along to those models. They're automatically fed out to the Kafka stream. And then classification. This is a really great feature that I'm excited for us to get further into. The tool that we're using features lexical machine learning to enrich the models. It provides machine-assisted classification and fact extraction using NLP. Machine learning and statistical techniques process information, such as content documents, data, and use that against other our semantic models. And where we are right now with Adobe Experience Manager, we have well over 12,000 content assets, and those range anything from images, PDFs, articles, action items, or learning goals. And I put those action items and learning goals on there because one of our key capabilities and strategies is to, once we build a content model, can we build it in such a way that it could be reused across other portals or for different content that another portal may want to create. So action items, as I mentioned, that's essentially small chunks of content with some CTAs or buttons available. And the same thing happened with learning goals from another product. They were able to reuse this and we didn't have to rebuild. And we all start with the content with a ditter wrapper around the content, and then we convert it to content fragments. One of the things we've done is with videos, though, we aren't actually storing them within the DAM, but rather the enterprise has something called Cultura or EVOD, and we store the actual video on the Cultura or the video hosting, and then within the content services platform, we simply have the content ID for the video, the title, the description, summary, the transcript, the runtime, other metadata, and the embed code from Cultura. So when the consuming portal calls for that, it's not about pulling out a heavy load of video. This allows us to have more flexibility in not loading the content dam up with unnecessary data. For loading images into the dam, however, on our roadmap, we want to look at pulling images directly from the image library versus loading all of the images into our content services platform. Another example, when I talk a little bit about the structure and managing the in-house approach to creating content fragments and the reuse, we took vendor article type content and then we assessed it across various portals in-house and how they were presenting articles. And then we came up with the various components or elements that we could reuse for the third-party vendor content as well as our in-house content articles. The other thing that's not on here is we did index across 6 AEM dams and allow for a central search tool. And this has been an ask of our marketers and copywriters because it's so difficult when content is scattered disparately across an organization. Where we'll talk a little bit about getting our content as a service started. Of course, setting up the CaaS API, testing our first clients, and they were actually knocking on our door in February, and we didn't get the API built out or the content as a service completed until April. So they were ready to go. Being able to pull in that third-party content was really key, and then converting it to DITA and having it live in a content fragment. We've also been able to use what we call a Swagger page for all of our environments, dev through prod, where we can, once we've authored a content ID and we've published it and made it available, we, the authoring or the strategist, can go in to Swagger and test to see that that piece of content is pulling through with its metadata. Creating new content, we follow our DITA to content fragment workflow for a particular model. Again, we work to reuse existing models as much as possible. The consuming portal calls for content assets by the content ID and from the content services ecosystem. And then the content fragment is sent through CaaS API in JSON format. As noted, we do have DITA and JSON both available. And then let's take a look at the architect here. So you can see as we started with vendor content, that brought that in through DITA, and that brought it into our AEM content ecosystem dam here. A lot of things happened after that. The ecosystem dam can feed that content out as content as a service. And down here is our ontology management tool. Before we feed out, we also input the tags and the ontology information that we want to add to the content. For this one project that we have going on, we've also been sending content through to this Kafka stream. So this is from a previous, but we'll send the content to the Kafka stream here. The post content metadata gets sent out to Kafka, and OGM or AEM, OGM happens to be our Optum Gateway Manager and is a personalization capability. They'll call for the model that's going to be used for a particular topic. Maybe it's cancer, kidney, benefits. Once they call for that, that information will come back and they're able to provide that information. OGM is listening for the information here. And then the portal will get those content IDs from OGM. And then the portal, this happens to be one of our member portals, and then they'll call for those IDs through content as a service. We're also able to have searching done through that search hub. And that was what I had talked about when somebody, maybe a marketing manager, searches from Content Finder, they're going through our search hub, which is connected with our DAM here. and pulling the content IDs into a one-page summary showing the content that's available. So let's go ahead and jump into a few case studies that we've worked through. This first one we call knowledge base widget, and the key problem statement was the advocacy agents were unable to quickly find resource content. And these were agents in our advocacy program that helped to deliver what's called benefit administration content. There were 3 different knowledge center sites, if you will, that were built in HTML. And the main finding was that the member or the agents had a really difficult time when they would go to the one site called Benefit Administration to be able to find the content quickly while they're on the phone with the member. So to get started on this, we did a pilot, and the advocacy agents quickly, we found they're not using the current search on the site and often giving out inaccurate information due to using older documents that they maybe saved to their desktop. And again, they weren't actually using the site search, and some of them really didn't even know how to do it. So what we went ahead and did is set up the knowledge center content within the AEM DAM. And while we did that, we also did consolidating. We did some content strategy to rewrite the content, put some summaries ahead so that the advocates, when they saw it, they would be able to quickly jump into that content. Then we authored the content in AEM guides, creating that model for the benefits content structure, authoring the content in data structure, and then the content was at the core. We also published it in HTML pages. So as part of the search from this existing Knowledge Center site that they're still using, they had a barrier-free access to the content. We also applied that semantic services layer and enhanced searching with taxonomy tags. Actually, a language model was also developed for this, and that was unique to benefit type content. And then we linked that language model to our other language modeler taxonomy. And then linking this to the Optum Unified Taxonomy provides a more robust and enhanced access to terms and searches, synonyms, and it improved the findability of the content with the agents. And so when we did the pilot test 2, after we did all of this work with the content through AEM, we found there was a lift in 10% usage by advocate agents using the search. And then we found an improvement in 60% accuracy in finding the right content over 10% that was identified in the first pilot. And the second one I want to talk a little bit about is delivering the right content to cancer patients. This is the second case study, and as you can imagine, patients, caregivers, family, those people dealing with cancer face tremendous challenges. And for our cancer program, it is designed to increase patient and nurse trust, provide evidence-based medicine and trusted content that the members can come use, reducing cognitive load for members, and then support them on their journey or wherever they are in their cancer experience. So at a high level, we brought in that content, brought into the ecosystem again, the third-party vendor content, and we made it available through an API in AEM. We structured the content as data and then created the content fragments. We pulled in some of the vendor metadata and added that as well as some of our own. All content types are available as content fragments with metadata. And down here on the lower left of the screen, you'll notice that we were able to provide well over 350 pieces of content assets for the care path experience. We integrated with AEM and our ontology tool, as well as OGM, that Optum Gateway Manager, which is our personalization data. And then we created a knowledge graph with the management tool, and that was the key for the personalization outside of AEM, but it allowed us to feed that associated content pairings through our Kafka stream. And for those of you who aren't quite familiar with the Kafka stream, It's a queue of messaging or events produced by an application and populates the Kafka topic queue, and then another entity or portal might listen for that data. We connected with consuming portals, and then those portals would call for the content ID. And this is another summary of that architect diagram that we just looked at. So let's jump into a summary here of the benefits. And our vision, obviously, is to build that ecosystem of tools, unifying the content sources and streamlining management and enabling content as a service and content as a personalization at scale. So the reasons we went forward with Adobe Experience Manager Guides obviously include that having structured data or structured content and XML data authoring was one of our requirements. And the flexible systems, and we're able to add micro products over time as we need. And then content as a service capability, obviously that was one of our key elements and requirements. And then being able to have that omni-channel delivery. In fact, today I was just on a really exciting call with one of our marketing partners where we're going to go ahead and set up a POC where we're bringing a variety of email templates into the content ecosystem and authoring them as data, making them available for the marketing managers to search across and fill them out as needed. And then they can pair it with other content in the ecosystem. So the journey hasn't actually been easy. It's been a little arduous, but in the mindset of beekeeping, a bounty of honey is well worth a sting. And what I've just showed you up here is that queen bee and her court. And those are the bees that take care of her, and they set the tone for the hive. So thank you. We can jump into questions.
I'll just speak a little. There we go. Hi, I'm Sebastian Fuhr from Mayo Clinic. I loved your presentation there. We have a lot of things in common. Just curious if you could tell us what your semantic service is. We use TopBraid. If you can't share, it's okay. I was wondering if it was TopBraid or Pool Party and how you integrated that. And then really, really quickly, second piece was, did you create a custom API extension to push your data into content fragments? Thank you.
What is our tool for semantic services? I won't say it publicly here, but I probably can tell you offline. And then did we create a custom API for our content fragments? We did. We didn't use the out-of-the-box one. We built one in-house that we're using now.
Hi, this is Sharmila Thirakonda from Navy Federal Credit Union. Did you have any opportunity where you had to integrate any dynamic data within the content, and how did you handle it?
Yes, so the tool that we use for ontology management has really key and crucial tags. The dynamic data that we're using is being pulled into what we call that OGM, Optum Gateway Manager. And that's kind of what our enterprise uses to bring in the data that will help us to determine which type of user will get what content. In fact, another use case that we have is another set of care pathways, and they are doing personalization right now based on demographic data of individuals. Rather than serving everybody the same 5 care pathways, they're able to set it up based on what we know about them.
Theresa, thank you again for jumping into the remote session and not being here live. That was, of course, a pity, but we would have loved to have you here. But still, thank you for joining through Teams in the session here now.
Oh, thanks, everyone. I appreciate your attention, and I enjoyed it so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.